Control is a game from Remedy Studios, who are famous for games like Max Payne and Alan Wake. And in 2019, they released this paranormal, parapsychology, action adventure, MetroidVania, using all of the gaming buzzwords, style of game onto the public. For me, this is a review of my post-mortem after playing Control through the main game. What I thought about it, the best parts, the parts I didn't like so much, and anything else. So if you are new to this channel, by the way, please help the channel out, as I definitely appreciate it, by hitting that like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell so you know when I have new videos and new live Let's Plays on the channel. We do live Let's Plays quite frequently on here, so you definitely want to check that out as I play new and older games on the channel. One of the first things I noticed when playing Control was the atmosphere. You play as Jessie Faden, a young woman who is going to the Federal Bureau of Control because there are mysteries surrounding the disappearance of her brother. She's talking to an entity who we later find out is a paranatural entity that is kind of guiding her in her head. She's here to get answers. She's here to talk about the bureaucracy of the Federal Bureau of Control and to possibly take it down. She happens upon a janitor at the beginning of the game, Ati, who he's a very interesting character. We're going to talk about him a little bit later on in some of the bigger mysteries around the game Control. But it's apparent that he kind of thinks that she's there applying for the job of his assistant, which she and us as the player are kind of taken aback by. And very quickly, we run into the fact that there is a major problem at the Federal Bureau of Control. It apparently is under lockdown and has some serious issues going on inside of it with an entity or a group of entities known as the Hiss, who she comes up with the name for herself, and everybody just kind of adopts the name as, hey, that's a cool name to call it, the Hiss. The Hiss are people, objects, things that have been taken over by this otherworldly entity that has invaded this entire place called the Oldest House. Now, the Oldest House changes and moves and shifts, and it's just a weird kind of combination of an office space that anybody who's worked in an office is very familiar with a lot of the ins and outs of what offices and this type of bureaucratic space looks like, and the paranormal, which I think is a very curious meshing of two styles. It is a Remedy trope. A lot of this game reminded me of kind of the set pieces from Max Payne, which is a series that I'm quite familiar with Remedy. It's not long after showing that she can contend with the Hiss in all of its various forms as a combatant that it is dawned upon her the title of the new director. Apparently the old director killed himself, and now Jessie is coming straight off the street, coming to confront the Bureau, now in charge of the Bureau. A role that she doesn't take too kindly at first, but as the game goes on, she kind of learns that it's kind of a necessary role. That whole kind of trope about you're not prepared to be a leader, no good leader ever is, but when you're called upon to be a leader, that's just naturally what you will do. Now, as far as the graphics in this game, I played this game, the updated edition, with all of the add-ons and all of the fixes and all of the lighting effects and everything else in it on a brand new souped up PC running a GeForce RTX 3070 graphics card. So I've got, it's probably one of the better high-end PCs out there to play this game on, playing it on PC, and the visuals are absolutely stunning. The ray tracing is just spot on. You can see your reflection in certain surfaces. You can turn these options on and off, of course, given the control settings that you have in the game. But not only do the graphics just look really good, and for me the frame rate was great. I do know on some of the earlier versions or some of the other ports, like to the PS4, there were frame rate issues. I had never encountered too many frame rate issues that really hindered my playing of the game, and I was also streaming the game live, so it was really performed way better than I expected it to. But just the look of the game, the slickness of some of the weapons, and we'll get into her service weapon later on, some of the abilities, the special effects, particle effects. The art direction in this game is phenomenal. Just again, like I mentioned before, taking very mundane office space and kind of accurately recreating it, and then mixing in these paranormal, paranatural elements into it was fantastic. The game is based off of the kind of the SCP Foundation creepypasta, which, if you don't know about that, a very quick TLDR on that is there is a fictional story out there that was kind of a game, and then it's a website, and it's a foundation for a lot of creepypastas that are out there. I've used some in some of the novels that I've written. It is exactly like the Federal Bureau of Control in this game. The SCP Foundation is a fictional, possibly, government agency that is made to investigate paranormal things and contain certain dangerous items. If you're into that kind of stuff, I definitely suggest you checking that out if you don't know what the SCP Foundation is. It does heavily borrow from a lot of that stuff, and it borrows from a lot of other things as well. Another great thing about Control is it is expanding the Remedy Studios Multiverse. So we get some allusions to Max Payne in this game, but more so we get a lot of callbacks and tie-ins from Alan Wake, to the point where Alan Wake is actually, spoilers here, Alan Wake is somewhat a part of this game, and they do it in a very interesting way that ties into the Alan Wake games. Getting into now the gameplay itself. The gameplay was pretty solid. I have played, like I said, the Max Payne games. I did play Alan Wake a long time ago. This is probably the best control scheme I've seen for a Remedy game. Jesse Faden essentially is wish fulfillment for any X-Men comic books fan. If you ever wanted to know what it would like to be Jean Grey and having telekinetic abilities to fight crazy creatures, then this is the game for you. There are a lot of abilities that you unlock during this game. She can create force fields out of debris. She can pick up debris and hurl it at enemies. She can do a dash move to avoid attacks. She can float in the air and pretty much fly for a limited ability in this game. And she has a telekinetic punch that if you upgrade these things, they all become more powerful as the game goes along. But those aren't the only abilities that Jessie has. She also has something called the service weapon. And the service weapon, much like the oldest house itself, the environment that you're in can change and warp into different things to do different things. And because she's able to warp this gun to different forms, it allows the gun to be a different kind of gun. You have the standard gun, again, the service weapon, your base weapon, which is basically like a pistol. Then you have the ability to morph it into something that's more like a sniper rifle. You have the ability to morph it into a grenade launcher. You have the ability to morph it into a shotgun. And you also kind of have the ability to morph it into what's called the shatter, which is kind of like a automatic weapon. I never really thought that it was good to use in a game, but your mileage may vary depending on your playstyle. Both the service weapon and your telekinetic abilities are run on a meter, and they do recharge. So kind of similar to the first Mass Effect game where you didn't really have ammo clips. It kind of overheated, and then you had to wait a little bit to get more ammo in your gun. The same kind of mechanism is used here in this game Control, where if you run out of bullets, you just have to wait a little bit for the service weapon to kind of restock itself with more ammo. Same thing with her abilities. You can burn out your abilities, and then you have to wait a period of time for them to refresh. The same thing does not apply, however, for your health meter, as you will need to take down enemies or do certain other things in order to replenish your health. You can use a lot of the checkpoints in the game also to replenish your health. One of the things about the game that I found to be fascinating and also somewhat disappointing were the enemies in the game. Now, while the enemies have a lot of variety within them, in one sense, in another sense, there is kind of a repetition with the enemies. One of the more annoying aspects for me during the gameplay was the constant, it seemed like every 20 minutes you'd get an alert that you had to drop whatever you were doing and go somewhere else on a timed mission to go do a side quest and then come back to the one you were at before, which if you're bad with directions, like sometimes I am in video games, that can be kind of annoying, because when you try to go, you finish the side mission and then try to go back to what you were doing in the first place, you can kind of forget what you were doing or lose where you were. The map to me also was not very helpful. I understand the way they tried to utilize the map in the game, but sometimes it would have you on a level above where you actually thought you were on the map, so you think you can go down a hallway, and then you wind up walking down there and find a wall because the map is showing you a different level above or below you, and you're like, where do I go now? The story in this game is pretty interesting too. Like I said, it is based a lot on the SCP Foundation, but they tell a story within the story in this game, and the main crux of the story is Jessie is trying to find her brother and what the Federal Bureau of Control did with her brother. She's also trying to find out what's going on with the Hiss, why the Hiss have invaded, what happened to the prior director, why did he apparently kill himself. And then there's Ahti, who is a character until you really get through the game and really kind of understand what that character is. He pretty much is kind of like the wizard or the Gandalf or the Dumbledore of this universe. In fact, the fact that he's a janitor carrying a mop has multiple different meanings. There's a lot of Norse mythology involved with his name and some of the other things that you see in the game. But Ahti carries around a broom, which kind of could be looked at as a wizard staff, like Gandalf would carry around. He does speak in riddles, kind of like Gandalf and other wizards had been known to do in the past, and other things like Dumbledore and Harry Potter always speaking in riddles, giving you the answer but not quite giving you the answer. He is one of the more fascinating characters that I do think they're going to expand upon, and I'm expecting to be a sequel to Control and what Ahti really was doing in the game. You also have a lot of other characters and other friends you meet along in the Federal Bureau of Control. Emily is one of the characters that you meet quite often, and some of the enemies you meet, the stories are varied here and there between how well these characters play out in the game, but there are some interactions that are quite humorous in the game. There's a lot of, as I mentioned, Norse mythology in the game. There's a lot of psychological history in the game. They do reference a lot of real world psychological theories within the world of Control. Sam Lake, who's the writer of this game, really is solid with his knowledge about some of these things and injecting them into this kind of a weird space, which if you're kind of a smarter person or a more intellectual person who, as a gamer, you're going to appreciate that stuff. Which brings me to how the other way the storyline is brought into this game, which is through a lot of documents that you find. And I mean, there are a lot of documents in this game. I still have not found all the documents in this game and read through them all, but there are stories in these documents that kind of advance the main story of the game. Some of them just expand the world of Control, and some of them are just jokes that are just very funny, a good sense of humor. There's this whole thing, one of the funniest things I found in the game, where they forced a guy to do a voice recording for an obstacle course, and he did a first take. And he didn't like the first take, and he's making a lot of mistakes in it, but then they decided just to use it anyway against his consent, and he's kind of pissed off about it. And there's another one about a rubber duck that's really funny too. And there's just so much packed into this game. It is a lot to get through everything in Control, but the journey is definitely a lot of fun. And the main story resolution, while some people thought it was a little bit lackluster, I did enjoy it. Some of the bigger boss fights were pretty awesome. The refrigerator boss fight was pretty cool. I would have liked to have seen more boss fights like that in the game. And the good thing about each boss fight, along with the other enemies in the game, is you kind of have to figure out the best way to defeat them, because you have to use a combination of Jessie's skills and the environment and how the environment changes and what the weaknesses of the enemies are in order to defeat them. So overall, I would say Control from 2019 by Remedy Studios was a pleasant surprise. I randomly picked this game by looking up games that people had liked as far as more recent releases, to trying to find something more modern to play on the channel. I did happen upon this game, which I didn't know much about. I hadn't heard much about before playing it, but after playing it, it is probably one of my favorite games that I have played this year. So I definitely recommend it to you guys, with the caveat, of course, that there's a lot to read. If you don't like reading, it's not going to be good for you. And there's a lot of weird stuff in here that you might not catch the first time, and you might have to think a little bit about. But I like that. I like anytime any form of entertainment can also entertain me as well as make me think, and draws upon some pretty deep concepts as far as the parapsychology and psychology world and Norse mythology in this game. I absolutely, again, recommend Control. Definitely check it out. Thank you guys for checking out this review. And if you have played Control, tell me what your favorite parts about it. Tell me whether or not this game interests you or not. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until then, I'll see you next time as we continue our Let's Plays, reviews, and everything else about the world of gaming and gadgets here on the Rantin Review Gaming. Have a good day.